David Walsh heard the sound again, a soft whimpering coming from somewhere deep in the fern section. He set down his watering can and listened carefully. 3 years working in the hydroponics bay of Greenhold Station had taught him every normal sound, every hum of machinery, every drip of the irrigation system. This was different. This was alive. He pushed aside the thick fronds of a Terran sword fern and found a pair of golden eyes staring back at him. David froze. The creature was small, no bigger than a house cat, with deep purple scales that shimmered even in the grow lights. It looked like someone had taken a dragon from Earth's old legends and shrunk it down to child size. The little thing trembled, pressing itself against the wall behind the planter boxes. "Hey there," David said softly, crouching down to seem less threatening. "You look lost." The creature's pupils widened. It tried to back away further, but there was nowhere to go. David noticed how thin it was, ribs visible beneath those beautiful scales. Its wings, small and delicate, were tucked tight against its body. Around its neck was a tarnished metal collar, the kind that might hold identification tags. David had seen plenty of alien species during his time on the station. Greenhold orbited Tessara, a major trading world, and beings from hundreds of planets passed through every day. But he had never seen anything quite like this. The way it held itself, the intelligence in those eyes told him this was no animal. This was a child. "Are you hungry?" David asked, keeping his voice gentle. He reached into his work satchel and pulled out his lunch, a simple sandwich with cheese and vegetables. The little dragon watched his every move with desperate attention. David tore off a piece of cheese and held it out on his palm. The creature hesitated, then darted forward with surprising speed, snatched the food and retreated to its corner. It ate like someone who had not seen a meal in days. Over the next 20 minutes, David fed the little dragon most of his lunch, talking quietly the whole time. He explained about the plants around them, about how he had come to the station from Earth, about anything and everything just to let the creature get used to his voice. Slowly, the dragon relaxed. It even let David touch its head briefly, the scales smooth and warm under his fingers. "You need help," David said. "Real help. Food, medical attention, someone to take care of you properly." He pulled out his communicator, but before he could call station services, the dragon made a sound that stopped him cold. It was a word, heavily accented but clear enough. "No." David stared. "You can talk?" The dragon nodded, then said another word. "Please." Something about that simple plea hit David right in the chest. This was not just a lost child. This was a child hiding, running from something. The fear in those golden eyes was real and deep. "Okay," David said, making a decision that would change everything. "But I still need to call someone. You cannot stay in my fern section forever. Let me get you proper food and water at least." The dragon considered this, then nodded slowly. David called station social services instead of security. When they arrived 30 minutes later, they brought a medical scanner and a xenobiologist named Priya, a human woman David had met a few times at staff gatherings. "Oh my," Priya breathed when she saw the little dragon. "That's a Dravine hatchling. They are rare out this far from their homeworlds. Can you help?" David asked. Priya ran her scanner over the hatchling, who had retreated back into the ferns at the sight of newcomers. Malnourished, dehydrated, but otherwise healthy. No signs of abuse, just neglect. "David, where did you find this child?" "Right here, hiding in my plants. Alone? No guardian?" "Completely alone." Priya frowned and tapped her communicator. Within minutes, station security arrived, led by an insectoid alien named Quellis, who served as the administrator for child welfare cases. Quellis clicked his mandibles together, a sign of deep concern in his species. "This is highly irregular," Quellis said in his buzzing voice. "Dravine do not abandon their young. They are fiercely protective." "Well, someone abandoned this one," David said, hearing the edge in his own voice. "We must take the hatchling to processing," Quellis stated. "Standard protocol." "Like hell you will," David replied, surprising himself with his vehemence. "This kid is terrified. You are not dragging them off to some cold processing center." Quellis's antennae twitched in what might have been surprise. "Mr. Walsh, you cannot interfere with station protocols. Try me." David moved to stand between the security officers and the ferns where the hatchling hid. "On Earth, we have laws about how you treat scared children. You handle them with care, with gentleness. You do not process them like cargo." "This is not Earth," Quellis pointed out. No, but I am human, and I am invoking human child protection standards as recognized under the Interspecies Welfare Agreement of 2251. David had no idea if he was even citing the right law, but he sounded confident. This child stays with me until proper services arrive. Real services, not just forms and holding cells. Priya hid a smile. He is technically right, Administrator. The agreement does allow for species-specific protection protocols when a member of that species is present. Quellis made a frustrated clicking sound. Fine, but you are responsible for the hatchling until we can locate its guardian. And Mr. Walsh, if you interfere further with this investigation, there will be consequences. Understood, David said, not backing down an inch. After the security team left, with only Priya remaining to provide medical care, David returned to the ferns. The little dragon peered out at him with what might have been gratitude. Looks like you are stuck with me for a while, David said. How about we get you cleaned up and fed properly? The dragon crept forward and very gently touched David's hand with one small clawed paw. In that moment, David knew he had just done something either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. But looking at those grateful golden eyes, he found he did not regret it one bit. 2 days passed before the summons came. David had set up a small space in the back corner of the hydroponics bay, behind the rows of tomato plants where the hatchling could rest without being constantly observed. The little dragon had started to trust him more, even attempting a few more words in heavily accented standard. David learned the child understood far more than they could speak. Priya had visited twice more, bringing specialized nutrition supplements and checking the hatchling's health. She told David the child was approximately 2 years old in human terms. Though Dravine aged differently, the species was long-lived and valued tradition above almost everything else. They are also intensely hierarchical, Priya had explained. Noble families, warrior clans, merchant houses. Your little friend here has markings that suggest high birth. See those silver patterns along the wing edges? That is not common. Now David stood in conference room 7 waiting. Administrator Quellis had informed him that a Dravine representative had arrived to claim the hatchling. David had insisted on being present for any identification process. The hatchling, whose collar David had been trying to clean, waited in Priya's medical bay under careful watch. The door opened with a soft hiss. David had expected lawyers, maybe security personnel. What walked through the door made him catch his breath. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue. Her wings, folded against her back, were edged with intricate silver patterns that seemed to flow like water. She wore robes of fine material, decorated with crystals that caught the light. Everything about her spoke of wealth, power, and nobility. But it was her eyes that struck David most. They were the same shade of gold as the hatchlings, but filled with a sorrow so profound it seemed to weigh down the very air. I am Lady Saraphene of House Saraphene, she said, her voice melodious despite the obvious distress. I was informed a Dravine hatchling was found on this station. Quellis gestured to a screen showing a recorded image of the hatchling. Can you identify this child, Lady Saraphene? She looked at the screen. Her wings trembled. For a long moment she said nothing, and David watched something like anguish pass across her elegant features. Then she spoke and her voice cracked. Not my hatchling. David blinked. That was not the reaction he had expected. Lady Saraphene, Quellis said carefully. Our medical scans indicate genetic markers consistent with House Saraphene. The probability of relation is 97%. I said this is not my hatchling. Saraphene's voice rose, desperate rather than angry. I have never seen this child before. You are mistaken. A human lawyer David had not noticed before stepped forward. His name badge read Advocate Torrance. Lady Saraphene, I must advise you that denying a child with clear genetic ties to your house could result in legal complications. I do not care. Saraphene turned away from the screen, her whole body tense. That child is not mine. I cannot claim them. I will not claim them. David had stayed quiet through the exchange, but now he spoke up. Why? Saraphene turned those golden eyes on him. Excuse me? Why are you so desperate to deny this child? David asked. Anyone can see the resemblance. The scales, the eyes, the wing patterns. That kid looks exactly like you. So why are you standing here lying about it? Mr. Walsh, Quellis warned, but David ignored him. Saraphene drew herself up to her full height, trying for imperious, but David could see the cracks in her composure. You know nothing of Dravine ways, human. You have no right to question me, Maybe not, David agreed. But I know something about parents and children. I know what it looks like when someone is in pain. And lady, you look like your heart is being ripped out right now. For just a moment, Saraphene's carefully constructed mask slipped. Her eyes glistened with what might have been tears. Then she pulled herself together, though her voice shook when she spoke. In Dravine culture, a noble house has the right to disown offspring deemed unsuitable. It is ancient law, written into our codes thousands of years ago. If a hatchling bears physical or mental defects, if they bring shame to the family line, they can be legally abandoned. David felt his stomach turn. That is barbaric. That is tradition, Seraphine said quietly. And tradition is absolute in the high houses. Advocate Torrance cleared his throat. It is true. Dravine family law is recognized under the Cultural Autonomy Accords. Individual species maintain sovereignty over their own family structures. So you can just throw away a child and that is legal? David could not keep the disgust from his voice. The child in question has a scale variation, Seraphine said, each word seeming to cost her something. The coloring along the dorsal ridge is off standard. In high society, this is considered a flaw. Unsuitable for a noble house? David stared at her in disbelief. You are telling me that little kid was abandoned because their scales are the wrong shade of purple? I am telling you, Seraphine said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, that I cannot claim this child. For their own sake, I cannot. Something in the way she said those last words caught David's attention. Not, will not, cannot. There was a difference there, buried under the formal language. Quellis was explaining legal procedures, talking about placement in approved facilities, but David was not listening. He was watching Seraphine, seeing the way her claws clenched and unclenched, the way her wings kept twitching as if she wanted to flee. Where will the child go? Seraphine asked suddenly, interrupting Quellis mid-sentence. There are Dravine facilities that handle such cases, Quellis replied. Renewal houses, I believe they are called. Seraphine went very still. No, not there. Lady Seraphine, if you do not claim the child, the courts must place them somewhere appropriate for their species. I will fight any placement to a renewal house, Seraphine said, and now there was steel in her voice. Those places are not what they seem. Find another solution. The child could be placed with a non-Dravine foster guardian, Advocate Torrance suggested, if one could be found willing to take on an alien ward. I will do it, David said before he could think better of it. Everyone turned to look at him. Quellis's antennae twitched wildly. Mr. Walsh, you cannot be serious. You have no experience with Dravine children, no training in their care, no legal standing to even request such placement. I found the kid, David said stubbornly. They trust me, and I'm not letting them get shipped off to some shady facility. For the first time since entering the room, Seraphine looked directly at David, really looked at him. Something passed across her face, an emotion too quick to name. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal pendant on a delicate chain. Without explanation, she handed it to Quellis. Give this to the child. For comfort, it is just a trinket, nothing more. Before anyone could respond, she turned and walked toward the door. Her wings were held high, her posture regal, every inch the noble lady. But just before she left, she paused and spoke without turning around. Mr. Walsh, humans are known for their protective instincts toward young creatures. I have researched your species extensively. I trust you will exercise those instincts well. Then she was gone, leaving David with more questions than answers, and a strange crystal pendant that felt far too significant to be just a trinket. David could not shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with the whole situation. He sat in his small quarters, the hatchling curled up on a nest of blankets beside him, sleeping peacefully for the first time since they had met. The crystal pendant Seraphine had left lay on David's work table, catching the dim light. He had given it to the hatchling earlier, and the little dragon had clutched it like a lifeline before falling asleep. The paperwork was still being processed for temporary guardianship, but Administrator Quellis had reluctantly agreed to let the hatchling stay with David while things were sorted out. Priya had helped set up a basic care plan, providing information about Dravine dietary needs and growth patterns. But David's mind kept returning to Lady Seraphine's face, to the pain in her eyes, to her strange parting words about human protective instincts. It felt like a message, like she was trying to tell him something without actually saying it. The door chime interrupted his thoughts. David opened it to find his friend Robert Chen, the station's maintenance chief, holding 2 bottles of something that looked like beer. "Heard you adopted an alien baby," Robert said, pushing past David into the quarters. "Thought you might need this." "It is complicated," David replied, taking one of the bottles. Robert glanced at the sleeping hatchling and whistled softly. "Cute kid. What's the story?" David explained everything, from finding the hatchling in the ferns to the bizarre meeting with Lady Saraphene. Robert listened quietly, his engineer's mind clearly working through the puzzle. "So let me get this straight," Robert said when David finished. "Rich Dragon Lady shows up, clearly connected to the kid genetically but desperately denies it. Then warns against specific facilities and practically begs you to take care of the child. That sound like normal abandonment to you?" "Not even close," David admitted. "What do you know about these renewal houses she mentioned?" "Nothing. Quellis said they handle unwanted Dravine hatchlings, but Saraphene's reaction to them was pure fear." Robert pulled out his data pad. "Let me do some digging. I know a guy who knows a guy in information services." While Robert worked his contacts, David examined the crystal pendant more closely. It was beautifully made, with intricate carvings too small to see clearly with the naked eye. He fetched a magnifying lens from his plant inspection kit and looked closer. There were words carved into the crystal, tiny flowing script in what must be the Dravine language. David could not read it, but he took several high-resolution photos with his communicator. "Got something," Robert said, looking up from his pad. "My contact says renewal houses are officially designated as rehabilitation and placement centers for Dravine youth, deemed unsuitable for traditional family structures." "Officially?" "Yeah, that is the key word. Unofficially, there are rumors. Stories about hatchlings who go in and never come out. About labor contracts signed by the facilities on behalf of children too young to consent. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire." David felt his jaw tighten. "They are trafficking children?" "If the rumors are true, yeah. But the Dravine government protects them under cultural autonomy laws. No outside species can investigate without violating treaties." The hatchling stirred in sleep, making a small distressed sound. David went to the nest of blankets and gently stroked the little dragon's head until they settled again. The child's scales were warm under his touch, and up close he could see the slight color variation Saraphene had mentioned. The scales along the spine were a shade lighter than the rest, creating an almost iridescent effect. To David, it looked beautiful. "Robert, what if Saraphene did not abandon this child? What if she was trying to save them?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "From what? Her own house? She said she cannot claim the child for their own sake." "Not will not cannot. What if there is someone in her family who would hurt this kid? What if dumping them on a station full of humans was the safest option she could think of?" "That is a lot of assumptions, David. But it fits. She researched humans, she said so herself. She knew we would not just let a child suffer. She practically pointed me toward guardianship." David pulled up the photos of the pendant's inscription, and she gave the kid this. "I need to know what it says." Robert studied the images. "My contact might be able to translate, but it will cost you." "What does he want?" "You have access to the hydroponics bay. Certain plants grow there that are very popular on the black market." David shook his head. "I am not smuggling drugs or hallucinogens." "Not drugs. Earth orchids. Apparently they are worth a fortune out here, and you grow the rare ones." David thought about it. Technically, the orchids were station property, but he propagated them himself and a few specimens would not be missed. "One plant. That is it. Deal." 2 hours later, David met Robert's contact in a dim corner of the station's market sector. The alien was a whisper, a species known for trading in information. Their form was shadowy and indistinct, making it hard to focus on them directly. "The orchid first," the whisper said in a voice like rustling leaves. David handed over a carefully wrapped specimen of a rare earth species he had been growing. The whisper examined it with appendages that seemed to shift in and out of sight, then made a satisfied sound. "The translation," David prompted. The whisper pulled up the photos on a portable screen and studied the inscription. Their form flickered, and when they spoke again, their voice held something that might have been surprise. "This is high formal Dravine, the language of noble houses. It says Ember Saraphene, first daughter of House Saraphene, born in fire, blessed by stars." The whisper paused. "This is a naming inscription. In Dravine culture, a parent carves this upon the child's hatching. It is sacred, unbreakable. A named child belongs to their house forever in the eyes of law and tradition. David felt something click into place in his mind. She named her. Saraphene named her daughter, blessed her, and then let her go. More than that, the whisper continued. The name Ember is significant. It means keeper of warmth, protector of home fires. In noble houses, such names are only given to children destined for high position and honor. But the child has a scale defect. Saraphene said they were unsuitable. The whisper made a sound like wind through grass. I know of House Saraphene. They are ancient, powerful, and deeply traditional. But Lady Saraphene herself is known as a reformer, someone who questions the old ways. She has enemies within her own house. Who? Her mate, Lord Thraxus. He is a traditionalist of the worst kind. If he deemed a child defective, he would demand they be sent to a renewal house despite the mother's wishes. Under Dravine law, the male head of house has final authority. David felt rage building in his chest, so she had to choose between watching her daughter disappear into a trafficking facility or abandoning her where she might be found by someone who would actually care. It appears so. And now you understand why she could not claim the child. To do so would mean returning the hatchling to her mate's authority. David looked at the photos of the inscription again. Ember Saraphene. The child had a name, had always had a name. Saraphene had not thrown away some defective offspring. She had made an impossible choice to protect her firstborn daughter. There is more you should know, the whisper said. Lady Saraphene has been making regular visits to this station for 2 years. Each time she transfers large sums of money to an unmarked account registered under human banking systems. She has been planning this, David realized, for years, setting up funds for Ember's care, and gambling that humans would live up to their reputation for protecting young creatures. A dangerous gamble, but it seems to have paid off. David returned to his quarters with a new understanding of the situation. Ember was not abandoned. Ember was hidden, protected, loved from a distance by a mother who could not acknowledge her without condemning her. The pendant was not just a trinket. It was proof of identity, proof of belonging, and a message that Saraphene had never stopped caring. He sat beside the sleeping hatchling and whispered, Your name is Ember. Your mother loves you, and I promise I will keep you safe. David spent 3 days cleaning the tarnished collar with careful precision. He used techniques he had learned years ago during a brief stint helping at an archaeological dig on Earth, applying gentle solutions and soft brushes to remove layers of accumulated grime without damaging the underlying metal. Ember watched him work with curious eyes, the little dragon having grown comfortable enough to perch on David's shoulder while he tended his plants. The child was talking more now, stringing together simple sentences in standard with David's patient encouragement. Ember had a remarkably sharp memory, learning the names of plants after hearing them just once. David had started teaching basic botany, and the hatchling absorbed every lesson with eager attention. Why clean? Ember asked, watching David work on the collar with a specialized cloth. Because it has writing on it, David explained. Important writing about you. About me? Yes, your name, your real name, is carved here. I want to see it clearly. As David worked away the last layers of tarnish, elegant script emerged from beneath, flowing and beautiful. He had already seen it on the pendant, but having Robert translate the photos was different from seeing the actual engraving. The metal seemed to glow slightly as it was cleaned, some property of Dravine metallurgy reacting to exposure. Robert stopped by that evening to help with the translation verification, taking careful measurements in photographs. That is definitely the same inscription as the pendant. Ember Saraphene, first daughter of House Saraphene. This is serious legal documentation, David. In Dravine culture, this collar would be placed on a hatchling during the naming ceremony. It is meant to be permanent. So Saraphene did not just name her daughter. She went through a full formal ceremony, which makes the abandonment even stranger from a legal standpoint. Once named, a Dravine child cannot be unnamed. The house is bound to them. David looked at Ember, who was carefully examining a tomato plant with intense concentration. Unless the head of the house decides they want nothing to do with the child. This Lord Thraxus sounds like a real piece of work. I need to talk to Saraphene, David decided. This whole situation needs to be out in the open. Ember deserves better than being hidden away. You know that might make things worse, right? If you force the issue, Thraxus could invoke his rights as househead and demand Ember be returned. Then we deal with that when it happens. But I am not going to let this kid grow up thinking nobody wanted them. Getting an audience with Lady Saraphene proved harder than expected. She had returned to her private ship and was refusing all communications. David tried going through official channels, through advocate torrents, even through the Dravine embassy on Tessara. Every attempt was politely but firmly denied. Finally, David did something that Robert called either brilliant or insane. He went to the docking bay where Saraphene's ship was berthed and simply refused to leave until she agreed to see him. He brought Ember with him, the little dragon wearing the now polished collar proudly. Station security tried to move him along 3 times. Each time, David calmly cited human diplomatic protocols about the right to petition foreign dignitaries on matters involving human wards. It was an obscure regulation that probably did not apply, but he said it with enough confidence that the guards hesitated. After 6 hours of David sitting cross-legged on the deck with Ember playing quietly beside him, the ship's airlock finally opened. A Dravine servant, smaller than Saraphene but elegantly dressed, emerged and regarded David with unreadable eyes. "Lady Saraphene will see you. Briefly. Come." David stood, brushing off his pants, and took Ember's small clawed hand. "Ready?" Ember nodded, clutching the crystal pendant that hung around their neck. The interior of the ship was stunning. Everything was crafted from materials that seemed to glow with inner light, and the walls were decorated with intricate carvings depicting Dravine history. The servant led them through corridors to a private chamber where Saraphene waited. She looked different here, away from the official setting of the station. She wore simpler robes, and her wings were relaxed rather than held in the formal position David had seen before, but her eyes still held that deep sadness when they fell upon Ember. "You should not have come," Saraphene said quietly. "You are making this more difficult." "Good," David replied. "It should be difficult. You are trying to pretend your daughter does not exist, and that is not right. You do not understand the situation. Then explain it to me." David held up the collar. "I cleaned this. I had it translated. Ember Saraphene, first daughter of House Saraphene, born in fire, blessed by stars. You did not just abandon a defective child. You performed a full naming ceremony for your firstborn daughter." Saraphene's wings trembled. "You had no right to investigate that." "I had every right. I am responsible for Ember's care now, and that means understanding who they are." Ember had been quiet through the exchange, but now the little dragon spoke up in a small voice. "Lady?" Saraphene closed her eyes as if in pain. "Hello, little one. Pretty lady. Nice scales." A sound escaped Saraphene that might have been a sob or a laugh. "Thank you, little one." David watched the exchange and made a decision. He gently nudged Ember forward. "Go ahead." "It is okay." Ember approached Saraphene hesitantly, looking back at David for reassurance. David nodded encouragingly. The little dragon walked right up to Saraphene and held up the crystal pendant. "Mine," Ember said proudly. "Pretty." Saraphene knelt down, bringing herself to Ember's eye level. This close, the resemblance was impossible to deny. The same golden eyes, the same elegant structure of the face, even the same small mannerisms in how they held their heads. "Yes," Saraphene whispered. "It was my mother's and her mother's before that. It belongs to the firstborn daughter of our house." Ember did not understand the full significance, but seemed pleased by the confirmation. The child suddenly reached out and touched Saraphene's face with one small paw. "Sad?" Saraphene's composure finally cracked. She pulled Ember into a gentle embrace, her wings coming around to shelter the little dragon. She spoke in Dravine, words David could not understand but whose meaning was clear in every sob, every gentle touch. After a long moment, Saraphene released Ember and stood, wiping her eyes. She looked at David with a mixture of gratitude and anguish. "My mate would kill her," Saraphene said bluntly. "Not quickly, not mercifully, but through neglect and cruelty in a renewal house where no one would question it. When Ember hatched with the scale variation, Thraxus called her defective, shameful, a stain on our ancient bloodline. I tried to reason with him, tried to make him see that she was perfect, but he would not listen. Under Dravine law, he had the authority to order her sent away, so you found another option. I researched every species in this sector. Humans were the only ones I trusted. You adopt across species lines. You fight for children who are not your own. You have a reputation for stubborn compassion that borders on foolishness." She smiled slightly through her tears. "I gambled everything that a human would find Ember and refused to let her go. That gamble was you, Mr. Walsh. David. My name is David. David, then. You must understand, if I claim Ember publicly, Thraxus will invoke his rights as househead. He will demand she be returned, and the courts will side with him. Our marriage binds me to his authority in matters of family. The only way to protect Ember is to keep her legally separate from House Saraphene. What about divorce? Leaving him? Dravine noble marriages are not so easily dissolved. It would take years, and Thraxus would fight it every step of the way. By the time I was free, Ember would have already been taken. David thought carefully before speaking. There has to be another way. Some legal avenue we have not considered. I have spent 2 years consulting with advocates across 3 systems. There is no clean solution. Either Ember remains hidden under your care or she returns to Thraxus's control. Then we keep her hidden, David said firmly, and we find a way to change the law. Saraphene looked at him with something like hope. You would do that? Take on an entire legal system for a child who is not your own? David looked at Ember, who was now exploring the chamber with innocent curiosity. She is my responsibility now. That makes her my own. That is how humans work. I will support you however I can without revealing our connection. I have already established funds for Ember's care and education. Whatever you need within reason I can provide. I do not need your money. I need your help changing the laws that make this necessary in the first place. For the first time since David had met her, Saraphene smiled. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, David Walsh. Probably both, David admitted. But I am not backing down. David was teaching Ember about earth roses when the emergency alert flashed across his communicator. The message was terse and official. Dravine authorities had arrived on Greenhold Station with legal documentation, demanding the immediate return of one hatchling to House Saraphene. David had 30 minutes to comply or face criminal charges for child trafficking. His hands shook as he read the message. Ember looked up at him with concerned eyes. David scared? A little, yeah. David knelt down to the child's level. Ember, do you remember when I told you about families? How sometimes people who love you have to make hard choices to keep you safe. Ember nodded solemnly. Some people are coming who want to take you away from here. I'm going to try very hard to stop them, but I need you to be brave. Can you do that? Stay with David? I am going to do everything I can to make sure we stay together. Robert burst into the hydroponics bay moments later, out of breath. David, we need to move now. I can hide you both in the maintenance sections while we figure this out. No. David stood, his jaw set. No more hiding. If they want Ember, they are going to have to go through me, and they are going to have to do it publicly. That is insane. They will just arrest you. Let them try. David scooped up Ember and walked toward the docking bay where the Dravine ship had berthed. A crowd was already gathering, drawn by the drama. Station security formed a perimeter, and Administrator Quellis stood looking deeply uncomfortable. The Dravine delegation was impressive and intimidating. At its center stood a male Dravine even larger than Saraphene, his scales a deep crimson marked with gold. His eyes were cold and calculating. This had to be Lord Thraxus. You are David Walsh? Thraxus's voice was harsh, commanding. I am. You are harboring property of House Saraphene. Surrender the hatchling immediately. No. A ripple went through the crowd. Quellis made a distressed clicking sound. Mr. Walsh, please be reasonable. The law is clear in this matter. The law is wrong. David held Ember a little tighter. The child pressed close to him, frightened by the angry stranger. Thraxus took a step forward. You dare defy me, human? I could have you executed for this insolence. Go ahead and try, but you will have to do it in front of all these witnesses, in front of station cameras with the whole galaxy watching, because I am not giving you this child. The hatchling is defective. It brings shame to my house. The only shame to your house is you. David's voice rang out clearly. This child is brilliant, kind, curious, and loved. The defect is not in Ember. It is in a culture that throws away children for having slightly different scales. More people were gathering now. David saw Priya pushing through the crowd, her communicator out and recording. Robert had positioned himself strategically, his own device capturing everything. Whatever happened next would be seen by thousands, maybe millions. A new figure emerged from the Dravine ship. Saraphene walked with her head held high. Though David could see the tension in every line of her body, she positioned herself between David and Thraxus. Husband, she said coldly. This is unnecessary. You dare question me? You who let this defective spawn escape rather than sending it where it belonged. I question a system that calls any child defective. I question a mate who values tradition over the life of his own daughter. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Thraxis's eyes narrowed dangerously. You admit it then. This spawn is yours. Her name is Ember, Saraphene said. Her voice steady despite the fear David could see in her eyes. Ember Saraphene, first daughter of House Saraphene, born in fire, blessed by stars. I named her according to ancient rite. I blessed her according to sacred tradition, and I will not let you destroy her. Thraxis laughed a cruel sound. You have no authority here. I am head of house. The hatchling returns with me to face proper placement. No, Saraphene said. I invoke the shield parent right. Silence fell over the docking bay. Even Thraxis looked shocked. Quellis's antennae went rigid with surprise. You cannot, Thraxis said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I can, and I do. The shield parent right is older than the abandonment laws, older than your precious traditions. When a noble house is divided on the fate of a child, a parent may name a protector from outside the house to serve as guardian and defender. This protector holds equal authority to the househead in all matters concerning the child. Saraphene turned to David, and he saw tears streaming down her face now, but her voice remained strong. David Walsh of Earth, you have shown courage, compassion, and devotion to my daughter. You have protected her when I could not. You have loved her when I was forced to hide my love. Will you accept the role of shield parent to Ember Saraphene? Will you stand as her guardian and defender against all threats, including those from within her own bloodhouse? David did not hesitate. I will. Then by the ancient laws of Dravine, by rights older than House Saraphene itself, I name you shield parent. Your authority over Ember matches that of her bloodhouse. Your word in her welfare equals mine. Thraxis roared with rage. This is treachery. Violation of our marriage contract. This is survival, Saraphene shot back. You gave me no choice. Either I find a way to protect my daughter, or I watch you kill her slowly in a renewal house. I chose life. A new voice entered the discussion, ancient and powerful. From the Dravine ship emerged 5 elderly Dravine, their scales pale with age, their movements slow but dignified. These were the Council of Elders, the ones who interpreted and enforced the ancient laws. The eldest, a female with scales like polished silver, spoke. The shield parent right has been invoked. We witness the acceptance. By law, it is binding. Those laws are obsolete, Thraxis shouted. Those laws are eternal, the elder corrected. They exist precisely for situations like this, when a house becomes unsafe for its own children. The right allows for protection without severing blood bonds. I am the head of this house, and the shield parent shares your authority over this specific child. You cannot remove Ember from his care without proving he is unfit. You cannot place Ember in a renewal house without his consent. You cannot even visit the child without his permission. Thraxis turned his furious gaze on David. You have stolen my daughter, corrupted my mate, destroyed my house's honor. No, David said calmly. I found a scared, hungry child and did what any decent person would do. I took care of her. If that destroys your honor, then your honor was not worth having. The crowd erupted in applause. Not just humans, but aliens of dozens of species, all witnessing a human stand up to a noble house for the sake of one small child. Thraxis snarled and lunged forward, but the Council of Elders moved with surprising speed to block him. You will not touch the shield parent or his charge. To do so would be to violate sacred law. This is not over, Thraxis hissed. I will challenge this in every court before every council. I will prove this human unfit. You are welcome to try, the silver-scaled elder said. But know that in 2,000 years, no shield parent properly invoked has ever been successfully removed. The law was designed to be unbreakable for exactly this reason. Saraphene approached David slowly. Ember, who had been quiet through the whole confrontation, reached out to her. Saraphene took the small hand gently. Thank you, she whispered to David, for being brave enough to do what I could not. You did the hardest part, David replied. You let her go so she could be safe. Can I visit? As the law allows. David looked at Ember, then back at Saraphene. You are her mother. Of course you can visit. Thraxis stormed back to his ship, his delegation following. But the Council of Elders remained, speaking quietly with Administrator Quellis about the legal details. Saraphene stayed in the docking bay, kneeling down to speak softly to Ember in their own language. David watched mother and daughter together, finally able to acknowledge each other, and felt something loosen in his chest. It was not perfect. Thoraxis would undoubtedly cause problems, but Ember was safe. That was what mattered. Robert appeared at his elbow. You know you just made an enemy of one of the most powerful houses in the Dravine hierarchy, right? Yeah, David said. But I also made sure one little kid gets to grow up loved and safe. I think that is a fair trade. Humans, Robert said, shaking his head with a smile. You are all absolutely insane. Probably, David agreed. But we are insane in the best way. 3 months had passed since that confrontation in the docking bay, and life on Greenhold Station had settled into a new rhythm. David's quarters had been upgraded to a larger family unit, complete with a separate sleeping area for Ember and a small study space where the young dragon could pursue her growing interest in botany. The garden section of the hydroponics bay had become something special. Ember worked alongside David every day, learning not just the names of plants but their needs, their growth patterns, the way different species interacted. The child had a gift for it, an intuitive understanding that went beyond mere memory. Under Ember's care, a dying orchid had bloomed for the first time in 3 years. A temperamental rose bush that had refused to flower suddenly produced dozens of buds. You have magic hands, David told Ember one afternoon as they transplanted seedlings together. Not magic, just listen. Ember pressed small claws into the soil around a young plant. They tell you what they need if you pay attention. David smiled. The child was right in a way. Plants did communicate through chemical signals, through the way they grew, through subtle changes in their leaves. Ember had learned to read these signs with remarkable skill. Saraphene visited twice a week now, usually in the evening when her official duties were complete. The first few visits had been awkward, mother and daughter dancing around the truth of their relationship while trying to build something new. But Ember was young enough not to hold grudges, and Saraphene was patient enough to let things develop naturally. Tonight, Saraphene arrived carrying a large package wrapped in traditional Dravine silk. Ember bounced excitedly when she saw it. Present? Yes, little flame. A present for you. Saraphene used the affectionate nickname she had started calling Ember, a term that meant something like bright spark in the Dravine language. Inside the package was a set of gardening tools, sized perfectly for small dragon hands and crafted from materials that would last a lifetime. Each tool was engraved with Ember's full name and the symbol of House Saraphene. Ember held them reverently. Beautiful. For a gardener of skill and promise, Saraphene said. Every craft deserves proper tools. David noticed that Saraphene looked lighter somehow, less burdened than she had been. How are things going with the reforms? Saraphene had become something of a revolutionary within Dravine society. The confrontation at Greenhold had been broadcast across multiple systems, and her public acknowledgement of Ember had sparked intense debate. Young Dravine especially had rallied to her cause, questioning the old traditions that allowed children to be discarded. Slowly, Saraphene admitted, settling onto a cushion David had acquired for her visits. The Council of Elders is divided. The older generation clings to tradition, but the younger elders see the need for change. I have been working with advocacy groups, collecting stories from others affected by the abandonment laws. How many? Hundreds. Children discarded for minor variations, for being too curious, too different, too independent. Some were sent to renewal houses. Others were simply left to die. It is shameful, and I am ashamed I did not fight harder against it before Ember. You are trying to survive in an impossible system, David said. You cannot change everything alone. But I am not alone anymore. Other parents have started speaking out. 3 noble houses have publicly rejected the abandonment laws. It is not enough yet, but it is a beginning. Ember had been examining her new tools but now looked up. Change is like growing. Takes time. Needs good soil. Both adults looked at the child in surprise. Saraphene laughed, a sound of pure delight. When did you become so wise, little flame? David teaches. I learn. The evening passed pleasantly. They shared a meal David had prepared using vegetables from the garden, supplemented with dishes Saraphene had brought from a Dravine restaurant. Ember chattered about her day, showing off new words in standard and demonstrating how she had learned to propagate succulents. After Ember went to bed, David and Saraphene sat in the small living area, talking quietly. I received word from my advocate today, Saraphene said. Theraxis is officially challenging the shield-parent bond. He is claiming you are unfit, that you are corrupting Ember with human values. David felt a chill. Can he win? No. The shield-parent right has never been successfully challenged. But he can make things difficult. He is demanding formal hearings, evaluations, constant monitoring. He wants to prove that Ember would be better off in a traditional Dravine household. What can I do? Continue being exactly who you are. Be the parent Ember needs. The courts will see what I see, what everyone who watches you two together sees. You are not corrupting her. You are teaching her to be kind, curious, and confident. She teaches me just as much, David said. I never thought about being a parent before. Now I cannot imagine life without her. Saraphene reached out and touched his hand, a gesture of deep trust in Dravine culture. You are a shield parent in more than just name. You protect not just Ember, but the idea that children deserve love regardless of how they are born. That is a revolutionary concept in my society. It should not be revolutionary. It should be basic decency. And that, Saraphene said with a smile, is exactly why I chose you. Weeks turned into months. Theraxis's challenges continued, but each hearing only strengthened David's position. Evaluators watched him with Ember and saw a child who was thriving, happy, intellectually engaged. They saw a parent who was patient, attentive, and deeply committed. The galactic media ate it up. The human gardener and his dragon daughter became symbols of interspecies cooperation and progressive values. Other human-alien families came forward with their own stories. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. One evening, David was working late in the hydroponics bay when Ember approached him with a serious expression. David, question. What is it, kiddo? You are my shield parent. Saraphene is my mother. What does that make you? David considered carefully. What would you like me to be? Ember thought for a long moment, golden eyes thoughtful. You are my Earth father. Teach me Earth things, keep me safe, love me different than Saraphene, but same amount. Is that okay? David felt his throat tighten. That is more than okay. That is perfect. Good, I tell Saraphene tomorrow. She will be happy. The child returned to the task of watering the ferns, leaving David standing there feeling like his heart might burst. Earth father. He had never expected to be anyone's father, especially not to a dragon child from halfway across the galaxy, but standing there in the quiet garden, watching Ember work with such care and concentration, David realized this was exactly where he was meant to be. Saraphene arrived the next day to find David had made a special addition to the garden. In a place of honor, visible from the main walkway, he had planted a small tree. It was an earth oak, a species known for strength and longevity. Hanging from one of its young branches was Ember's naming collar, polished until it shone. Beneath the collar, mounted on a wooden plaque, was a new inscription. David had worked with a master engraver to create it in both Dravine and English. In Dravine, it read, Ember Saraphene, first daughter of House Saraphene, born in fire, blessed by stars. In English, David had added, some gardens grow more than plants, some humans grow more than crops, some families grow from the heart. Saraphene stood before the tree for a long moment, reading the words over and over. When she finally turned to David, tears streamed down her face. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing her worth when her own father could not. For standing against tradition when it would have been easier to walk away, for being the parent I needed you to be. Thank you for trusting me, David replied, for taking a chance on human stubbornness and compassion. Ember ran up then, fresh from her lessons with Priya, and stopped when she saw the tree and the collar. My name, she breathed. Pretty, your name and your truth, Saraphene said, kneeling down. You are Ember Saraphene, daughter of two worlds, loved by two parents, blessed by more than stars. You are proof that families can be built, not just born. Ember looked between her mother and David, then wrapped her small arms around both of them as best she could. Best family. Different but good. David met Saraphene's eyes over Ember's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, respect, shared commitment. They were not a traditional family by any species standards. But they worked. They loved. They protected each other. Years later, when Ember had grown into a brilliant xenobotanist and advocate for interspecies adoption rights, She would tell the story of the day her Earth father found her hiding in the ferns. She would explain how human stubbornness had saved her life, how a simple gardener had challenged an empire, how love had proven stronger than tradition. But on this evening, she was simply a child, safe between two parents who loved her, standing beneath a tree that symbolized growth, strength, and the power of families built from the heart. Above them, through the transparent ceiling of the hydroponics bay, the stars shone bright. Somewhere among them was the Dravine homeworld, ancient and proud. And somewhere among them was Earth, young and stubborn and endlessly compassionate. Two worlds, one child, one family, different but good, always good.